Okay, I think we got it now. Yeah, okay. I got it all fixed. I just needed to read, so I apologize for everyone. We're back. I had to restart my computer, and there was an update for my streaming platform software. And that was causing an issue. So I apologize for that. So we're back. I hope everyone, we're waiting for everyone to get back on board here with us. Wait for everybody to filter back in if we can. I think it looks like it's a lot better on Instagram. It's not choppy at all. So I got it fixed. Like I said, there was a software update that I had to do real quick, and I had to restart my computer. So probably just done that earlier, but spending most of the day looking into my story. And I don't know if you saw it. It was pretty good. That Representative Mike Kennedy, the architect of Utah's ban on healthcare for transgender youth in the state, voted against Marjorie Taylor Greene's federal ban. It still appears that we're still a little choppy here, and I'm not sure what is going on with that. Maybe if I stop the recording, maybe that'll clear up some of the stuff that's happening on the happening with my hardware. Hopefully that'll fix it. So anyway, if you have any questions, any comments, please leave them in the chat and we'll get back to our discussion. So as I was saying, I wrote today that Representative Mike Kennedy, the Representative Mike Kennedy, who is the Republican freshman in the House of Representatives. He is also the architect of Utah's ban on transgender affirming care for transgender youth. He sponsored that bill in the legislature when it went through in 2023. And now he voted against a ban, a federal ban that was sponsored by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. He was one of 4 Republicans who voted against it. Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill was much more harsh than the bill that he sponsored here in Utah. And if you remember, that bill, the bill here in Utah banned gender-affirming care, surgery, hormone treatment, puberty blockers for anyone under the age of 18. He pushed that through in 2023. A doctor who violated that, it was professional misconduct. They could lose their license for that. I think there was also a private right of action, or there was a malpractice suit that was possible. So he paid in Utah, but he was one of 4 Republicans in Congress who voted against that piece of legislation that was sponsored by Marjorie Taylor Greene, a similar piece of legislation. Hers had much harsher penalties. Providers who violated it could face fines and up to 10 years in prison, and there was also a private right of action. When he voted against it, I reached out to him, tried to get a statement from him. They did not respond, but on his social media, he posted a statement where he said, "I voted against H.R. 3492 because it expands federal powers in a way that will invite constitutional challenges and leave loopholes that will be exploited. I am opposed to the evil practice of transgender child mutilation and am committed to finding a solution, as I did in the state of Utah, to protect America's children. Representative Kennedy is a doctor, so it's interesting that he was one of the 4 Republicans who voted against this bill. It still passed because there were 3 Democrats, I think, who crossed over and voted with the majority Republicans. Okay, so we're back up and running now. Nothing's choppy. Everybody's got a good quality, so let's talk. What do you want to talk about? What is on your mind tonight? There's a lot of stuff going on in Utah politics right now. We just spent a good period of time talking about the latest in the gerrymandering lawsuit. As I said, the judge is expected to issue a ruling on the legislature's attempt to force her to declare or her request, their request to have her declare a final judgment. So they say they need that, and they actually do need that in order to move forward with their appeals process. But as I said, the problem is they missed their opportunity. They had a chance to appeal, and they didn't do it. All right, so what's on your mind tonight? What are your questions? What are your comments? Everybody done with your Christmas shopping? I think I am. I'm sure something's going to come up and bite me in the butt. My mind's elsewhere as I'm excited for tomorrow night and the college football playoff game between my beloved Oklahoma Sooners and the Alabama Crimson Tide in Norman. God, I wish I was in Norman tomorrow night. I cannot even imagine what that stadium's going to be like. Big-time college football is amazing. Big-time sporting events. Anyway, this is not a sports talk show. We're not going to talk about that. A number of other stories in the news this week that are very interesting. There's a lawsuit against from a Native American tribe accusing House Speaker Mike Schultz of interfering when they were trying to buy some land from the state through SITLA, the State Institutions Trust Land Administration. They sell that land and the money goes to fund schools. And they're accusing House Speaker Mike Schultz of stepping in and meddling and making it so they weren't able to buy this parcel of land, which is Tabby Mountain. And the thing about SITLA is the state is legally mandated to take the largest bid. And again, there's a bunch of land developers in the state. I think that what they wanted to do is they wanted to log on Tabby Mountain, or they were trying to find a way to open up logging in that area. And had the Native American tribe been able to purchase it, that avenue would have been closed. At least I remember when they were talking about this during the 2019 legislative session. I was trying to figure out what they were doing with this, because that parcel was on the SITLA list and then it was taken off the list. As I said in our subscriber-only live stream the other night, I was trying to go through my notes and find that, and I'm still trying to find those documents. We had the president's speech last night. I don't know if you saw it today, but the president announced the Patriot Games, where they're going to have, it's an athletic competition with one man and one woman from each of the 50 states, and they're going to have a big competition. Sounds like the Hunger Games. I mean, that's the easy joke that everybody was making, that this is literally the plot of the Hunger Games. But as someone else said on social media, awfully bold of you to think that the president has even read the Hunger Games. Awfully bold of you to make that assumption. UDOT is moving forward with their plan on wintertime congestion in Cottonwood Canyon. In 2023, they said that they wanted to build a gondola as its preferred method. Several organizations sued. UDOT said they could not implement any sort of traffic calming measures until those lawsuits were resolved. But now they're not going to wait, and they're going to do pretty much the same thing that they were doing in Big Cottonwood Canyon. They're going to increase busing, build a transportation hub. So at least they're moving forward on that. I know that has long been a frustration for everybody. I don't ski, but I've been up that road, and so I can see why it's a big frustration to get up there. And busing makes sense. There's just not a lot of room for cars. People don't like to ride the bus, but that's the easiest way to get them up there. I'm not going to get into it about the gondola, which hasn't been another point of contention. Rod B. Mosier says, Boomer, sooner, man. BMFS. I am so wound up for that game tomorrow night. You don't even know. I was in school there when we sucked. Gary, all I have to say is Gary Gibbs. That was not a fun time. And I was actually a resident advisor in the athletic dorms when they had athletic dorms. I lived with the men's gymnastics team. That's who was on my floor. They won the national championship one year. Funny story from that time. The gymnasts were great. They were a bunch of great guys. And one of them, we were sitting in their room and kind of just talking and hanging out one night. And one of them had a magazine. Now, this is in the 80s, so we didn't, we had magazines and television, and the early Nintendo. Not all the distractions we have now, but one of them was sitting in his room. We were sitting in his room and we were talking, and he was looking at a gymnastics magazine. I think it was like USA Gymnastics, and he was doing the crossword puzzle. And he was reading the clues out loud, and one of them was like, who won the individual all-around national championship in 1987 or 88? And he stops and he pauses and he goes, me. And that's what was correct. I thought that was extremely funny. I remember that very, very vividly. On YouTube, Dank says, sitting in the House chamber last Tuesday and listening to Representative Casey Snyder, among others, give disingenuous arguments against Prop 4 was really painful. They clearly don't like it, and they're trying to repeal it. And they're trying to repeal it without having the fight. Because, as I have said, I've explained so many times, there is an unanswered constitutional question, a question the courts have not considered yet, about who gets to draw the maps. Because in the Constitution, it literally says that is the job of the legislature. Now, Prop 4 attempts to get around that by saying that this independent commission draws the maps, presents them to the legislature, and the legislature has to vote them up or down. And that might be enough to get them, that might be enough to satisfy that requirement. I don't know. We have not had that. That has not been tested in the courts. And I don't think the legislature wants to test it. They're doing everything they can not to test that. Because you would think that that's how they would challenge this. But instead, they're trying to just repeal the bill. They're trying to repeal the law. They couldn't do it under SB 200. That was unconstitutional. They were going to try to do it with the indirect initiative. And the lieutenant governor told them that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. So now they're going through the ballot itself. And you have to ask yourself why they're not doing that instead of litigating this, because they're very willing to litigate other things, but they don't want to litigate this. And I think it's because they don't want to take the chance that they get an answer that they don't like. So that's why they just want to repeal it, get it off the books so they don't have to do that anymore. Always PR on TikTok says, I read the legislature is going to expand the Utah Supreme Court. Yes, they are. We have 5 people on the Supreme Court now. They're going to go to 7. And there are pros and cons for that. But this will give me a chance to talk about a great article by Jay Willis over at Balls and Strikes. If you have not read Balls and Strikes, I would encourage you to go over and read that website. It is ballsandstrikes.org. And it is it's very good reporting about the courts, about the legal system, about the Supreme Court. The name is a takeoff on what Chief Justice John Roberts said during his confirmation hearing, that he was just there to call balls and strikes. And they do analysis about what is happening. And I spoke with Jay for about an hour and a half about this to sort of give him some background on what the lay of the land was here in Utah politically. And I thought his article was fantastic. And the headline is, Utah Republicans are declaring war on the Utah Supreme Court. And they're talking about the justifications that are being made to about the justifications that are being made to expand the Supreme Court. As Jay Willis writes, Cox, in a press conference, in his monthly press conference last month, said that he wants to get more resources to justices and judges, arguing that cases take too long to wind their way through the system. He says there's a reason most medium-sized states to larger states start to move to the 7 to 9 justice range. Now, this is what Willis writes about that. The timing of Cox's interest in the provision of judicial resources is, to put it generously, odd. Last year, the Utah Supreme Court issued 60 opinions. That's more than the previous year, which was just 47, and a major jump from the 27 decisions that it issued in 2023. Chief Justice Matthew Durant, who joined the Utah Supreme Court 25 years ago, he has warned that a larger court would probably take more time, less time, not less, to issue its decisions. Why? Because you have more people having to weigh in, more people having to do their analysis. As Willis writes, Cox, in other words, is claiming to want to solve a non-existent problem with an ineffective solution, a solution that would just so happen to give angry Republicans 2 more chances to ensure that the next time they want to implement a law of dubious constitutionality or gerrymander voters out of electoral existence, they will do so before a friendlier audience. And they won't say that explicitly, but that is the motivation for this by the legislature. They don't like the decisions that have been coming down from the Utah Supreme Court, so they want to pack the court to get a friendlier audience. That's what they're trying to do. Rod Moser says, I was privileged to be at Oklahoma for Stoops' run. I envy you, man. I've gone back for a few games in the last couple of years. I was there for last year's home game against Tennessee. That was the loudest I've ever heard that stadium, and I can't even imagine what it's going to be like tomorrow night. But if I've never had the privilege of meeting Bob Stoops, and I think that if I did, I would legitimately break down in tears. I don't know how I'd be able to handle myself. Anyway. Rod Mosier says, stacking the Supreme Court out-of-state signers, little lack of confidence. I heard a guy running for Congress who claimed the wording of the Prop 4 bill was at such a high-grade level that people didn't understand it, and that's why it passed. Thoughts? Maybe. That's certainly the way that lawmakers are thinking about this. I don't have the clip in front of me. I wish I would have teed it up for you tonight. But there is a right-wing group, I've written about them before, called Utah Citizens for the Constitution. They're an extremist group. I'm not going to get into just how bad this organization is and how they are sort of a cancer on our legislative process here in Utah. But they're a far-right organization, and every month they host these Zoom calls for everyone. It's not hard to get into them. I attend every month, and I record them. And this last month, they were talking to Representative Rex Shipp, who is from the southern part of the state. And they asked him about Prop 4. And he basically dismissed the entire idea of ballot initiatives. And I'm paraphrasing here. I'm aggressively paraphrasing. But what he said was, voters don't understand what they're voting for. Lawmakers do the deep dive. So that's why we should not pass these ballot initiatives. Essentially, the argument is voters are stupid, lawmakers are smart, we should listen to the lawmakers. And that's why they don't like direct democracy. They don't like it. So someone who said that to you, that absolutely tracks, Rob. Absolutely tracks. Follow-up to the Supreme Court discussion, also from Always PR, who says, and Governor Cox chooses and appoints the new justices. So doesn't that mean the Utah Supreme Court will be like the SCOTUS? They're moving in that direction. I mean, right now, the justices are actually, a number of names are put forward by a commission. The commission does a lot of the legwork to decide these judges. It's not just for the Supreme Court. It's for all of the judges. They put forth a number of names for the governor to choose from. And then the governor picks one. They have their confirmation hearing at the court. Yada, 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 we are done. And that's for every level of the judiciary here in the state. But we've already changed some things about the Supreme Court. Now, instead of the justices picking their chief justice, the way that works is there are 5 justices on the Supreme Court and they decide among themselves who is going to be the chief justice. Not anymore. Now, when we need a new chief justice, that will be someone who is nominated by the governor and confirmed by the legislature. Now, you have to remember, and Jay Willis pointed this out, I pointed this out to people, we have not had a Democratic governor in several decades. The last time we had a Democratic governor, I think Mitt Romney hadn't graduated from college yet. And so all of these judges who are there have been appointed by Republicans. It is just in recent years that the judiciary, both at the national level and now on the state level, is becoming more of a partisan fight. So you have to remember that. I'm curious, Rod, who this person who was running for Congress said that people didn't understand that. I'm curious who it is. You can drop me a DM if you don't want to say it in the chat, and that's fine. Rod follows up on my comment about Rex Shipp. So their thought is that the voters are too stupid to read and comprehend what they're voting for. They just don't like, they think they should be the legislature believes they are the only ones who should be able to propose laws. They do not like ballot initiatives. They don't like the process because they don't control it. On that same call where I heard Rex Shipp talking about how they don't trust voters to make a decision, on that same call, they had Representative Mike Peterson, who is from up north. Mike is the person who originally sponsored the bill that was going to require the 10 Commandments in all classrooms, and he watered it down significantly here in Utah. But he almost was in tears talking about how if they can't find a way to stop these ballot initiatives because of these out-of-state groups, these shadowy out-of-state groups coming in and imposing values from outside of Utah on the state, that within 5 years we're not going to recognize this state anymore. And he was almost in tears. I've got it on tape. It sounded like he was about to cry. He was so worked up about this. And this completely ignores the fact of what's happening right now with this ballot initiative to repeal Prop 4. This effort is entirely funded by one donor, a group called Securing American Greatness. They're not from Utah. They are a 501c4 super PAC. They are a dark money group. They're a charity. They're not a super PAC. I misspoke. They're a dark money group. They're a nonprofit. But what I mean by dark money, they are not required to disclose their donors. And they can spend unlimited amounts of money. They can't advocate for the election of someone or whatever, but they can educate voters. They're educating voters. And they've dropped $4.35 million into the state on this effort, and they're the only donor. But meanwhile, you have Republicans crying about the fact that out-of-state groups who are shadowy and don't represent Utah are going to spend a bunch of money trying to change the way that liquor is sold in the state and legalizing marijuana. Yeah, show me. Show me where those groups are, because it is insanely hard to get a ballot initiative on the ballot. Lawmakers saw to that after voters passed 3 ballot initiatives in 2018. They changed the rules. They made it harder. If you're using signature gatherers, first of all, the signature requirements have always been extremely high, and they actually made them higher. But if you're using paid signature gatherers, and you have to use paid signature gatherers, you no longer can pay them by the signature. You have to pay them by the hour. That's a change to the law that lawmakers made. They made it so that that if you are going to sign that ballot initiative, you have to stand there, you have to read the entire initiative, and then you have to affirm positively that you read it and you understood it. So that slows it down as well. And those are some of the changes they made. They made those changes to stop ballot initiatives from happening, and now all of a sudden they have to play by those same rules, and that's why they're spending $4.3 million on this. A comment from YouTube. How real is Republican infighting in Utah? Are crazy, chaotic Republican primaries going to occur in 2026 and 2028? Most of the Republican infighting happens within the party itself, and the stakes are very low. It's not about the elected seats. Congress, it's hard to run for Congress. That's a lot of money. Legislature, depending on if it's a safe seat or not, it could cost a lot of money, or so there's a bar to entry where you're not going to have a lot of the infighting. Where the infighting happens is within the party itself, usually about party rules, usually about ethics violations. Some Republicans said something that another Republican doesn't like, and so they brought him up on ethics violations. The problem with that is really hard for reporters like me to find that information. I am working on a story right now about a doozy of a brouhaha that's been happening in one of the local Republican parties. Should have that for you the next day or two, but it's pretty wild. The problem is it's hard to get any information because the political parties are private organizations, so I can't grandma any documents. I can't get a hold of those things. But people still, they still talk to me. Steve Merrill says, any signal from the state Supreme Court on taking up the GOP appeal, or have they not filed yet? Well, Steve, if you had read my newsletter on Tuesday and this morning, That's what they're fighting about right now. The legislature needs the judge, as I've said before in this live stream, I explained before, the legislature needs the judge to declare, to enter a final judgment so they can start their appeals process. And why? Because they missed the window. They had a window under the rules of procedure, under a rule that they passed earlier this year. They changed the law earlier this year and made it so, they could appeal immediately. They changed the law and they didn't take advantage of it. They had two windows. One, a 30-day window after the initial ruling throwing out the congressional maps. The second one, right after the judge rejected option C and put the plaintiff's map in place, they had another window to file an appeal. And the Supreme Court made it clear that they were ready to consider it on an expedited basis. But they sat on their hands, they didn't do anything, and now they're blaming the plaintiffs for dragging out the process. And I don't blame the plaintiffs for trying to litigate this fully. They're not going to do the legislature any favors in this. They're pushing back hard against this narrative that the legislature is trying to spin, that it's the plaintiffs who are slowing things down, which is it's not the truth. The legislature had an opportunity. They had ample opportunity. They just didn't use it for whatever reason. So Steve says, yeah, I'm behind. Well, I explained it, Paul. There are two articles on my website. The one today, I was so insanely happy with myself because the picture I put up was Michael Scott from The Office, from the infamous "I declare bankruptcy," but I photoshopped the Utah State Capitol over his face and said, "I declare appeal," because that's essentially what they're trying to do. They're trying to Michael Scott their way out of this. And when I came up with that image today, I was very pleased with myself because, and here's a little secret, a lot of the stuff that I do, well, I wouldn't say a lot of stuff, but sometimes these things that I do, sometimes it's a visual, sometimes, it's a topic that I write about, that's for me. Most of the time it's for you. Most of the time it's for you. I would say 99.9% of the time, but every once in a while, it's for me, and I get so insanely happy when I do it. So if you go to the website, utahpolitics.news, you'll see the visual. It made me so happy. I was just gleefully ecstatic over that. Rod Moser says, thoughts on the number of Democrats entering the congressional race? Well, what do we have? 6 now? We have Ben McAdams. We have Derek Kitchen. I interviewed him for the podcast. I'll be putting that out probably tomorrow. We had Nate Bluen. We had Ava Lopez. So maybe it's 5 or 6. I don't have all the names in front of me. But if this map stays in place, and at the rate we're going, it's probably going to. The legislature is going to run out of time to appeal because they had their opportunity. And now there's no incentive for the plaintiffs to speed this up. I'm sure that at some point they'll be able to start their appeals process, but under the established rules, they have to wait because they missed their opportunity. And right now, the drop dead date is March 9th. That is the day that congressional candidates can start filing for office, unless they come back and move the filing date again. I've even heard rumblings that lawmakers have considered moving the congressional primary, just the primary, back to give themselves more time. And I wouldn't put it past them, but at some point they're going to run out of opportunities to move the calendar. So right now, I would say, if I were a betting man, I would say the legislature might run out of time to appeal this, and the map will stay in place, the map we have now. And if it does, it is going to be a Democratic Donnybrook, and we have not seen one of those here in the state in a very long time. Why? Because this is a D+14 seat on Salt Lake County. It is a seat that is likely to elect a Democrat. It's not a lock. I've seen Senator John Johnson on social media crying about the media saying this is a Democratic-leaning seat. Well, it is a Democratic-leaning seat. And why? Because I look at the numbers. I don't just do vibes. I look at the numbers, and I broke this down for you. if you look at the voter registration, yes, that district in 2024 and 2020 would have voted for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden by more than 15 points, 14 or 15 points. But if you look at the voter makeup of that district, it is not a Democratic majority district. Democrats still make up the third largest voting bloc in that district. It's Republicans first at about 35%, 30% are independents, 25% are Democrats, and the rest are a smattering of other parties. So whoever the Democratic nominee is going to be, they can't win by just appealing to Democrats. They're going to have to get independents. They're going to have to get some Republicans to cross the aisle. That's not the case for the Democratic primary, but whoever wins that nomination is going to have to put together that kind of coalition. Hopefully that explains that for you. How many CD1 Dems do you expect to gather signatures? All of them if they're smart. All of them if they're smart. It is political malpractice to not gather signatures. Candidates who don't gather signatures don't have the resources to gather signatures. They don't have the infrastructure. Also, it's not as big of a no-no on the Democratic side as it is the Republican side. Republicans hate the signature gathering. Republican delegates hate the signature gathering process. Democrats are all for it. So I don't think any candidate is going to be punished by delegates, by Democratic voters for gathering signatures. But also remember, the Democratic primary is open to anybody. Republicans can vote in the Democratic primary as long as they don't vote in a Republican primary. Democratic primary is open, so you'll have independents voting in that primary. You may have some Republicans voting in that primary. I'm 100% sure that this is not going to be decided at convention. You will have signature gathering candidates. This is going to move on to the primary. On June 24th, I believe, is when the primary is scheduled for. We'll have to look at those dates. It's in June. Nathan Detroit says Reby maybe. Reby and Namo. Yeah, and Kathleen Reby is another one. I need to get her on the podcast as well. So that's the other one. And they've all filed their paperwork at the FEC. They're all running. Nathan Detroit says a given voter in CD1 can only sign for one candidate, right? Yes, but remember, they changed the signature rules for congressional candidates this year. You don't have to be in CD1. Anybody can sign in any district because we don't know what the final districts are going to look like. So they weren't going to hamper signature gathering candidates because that would open them up for a huge lawsuit. And they don't want to add that on top of what's already going on. So they changed the rules for this election only that you don't have to get signatures from registered voters in the district that you're running. It's statewide. So it's 7,000 signatures. It has to be someone who can vote for you in the primary. So that means these Democrats are not going to... Theoretically, a Republican could vote for them in the primary, but they're not going to count Republican signatures. So it's signatures from Democrats and it's signatures from independent candidates. And you're right. It's the first. If a voter signs a petition for two candidates, the first person who turns that name in is the one that wins, and then it doesn't count for the other candidate. But they've expanded that beyond just the one district because of all the court shenanigans. But that's for this election only. Let's see. Steve Merrill says, do you expect any of them to collect statewide instead of just focusing on within CD1? As I said, they don't have to. Because they changed the rules. Will there be debates for the primary? This is a question from YouTube. Sure. Yeah, I'm sure there will be. Remember, the legislature took over the Utah Debate Commission, giving it to Utah Valley University and the Hinckley Institute for Politics. So they're going to be running the televised debates. I've got a real problem with that because these are state-funded organizations funded by... I had problems with the Utah Debate Commission. I thought their format sucked. I thought the way that they it was not a great product, and it did not help voters at all. I'm of the mind that debates really don't help. They don't really do anything to educate voters. But if you remember, the legislature passed a bill. I don't know if it was last year, maybe it was last year or the year before, where they're going to fund the debates through Utah Valley University, the Herbert Institute, and then the Hinckley Institute up at the U. And I would be very wary of that because those two groups, I mean, the Hinckley Institute has got a great name, but Jason Perry is a lobbyist. I had a problem with the Utah Debate Commission when they would get people to moderate those debates they'd have Jason Perry. He's a lobbyist. He shouldn't be moderating a debate. Mara Carabello, lobbyist, should not be moderating those debates. Yeah, I think it's just a massive conflict of interest. But if people would listen to me, they'd do it this way. You do it like they do down in Texas, right? You open it up, you have 3 journalists sitting in front of the candidates, just lobbing questions at them. You don't do the student question to try to justify the state funding. In a perfect world, if you put me in charge of these debates, that's what I would do. I would have 3 journalists. I would pick 3 journalists to lob questions at them and invite all the candidates. It wouldn't be a threshold for showing up. They do this. They do something similar in Colorado. They do it in Idaho. The Idaho debates are because they get crazies on the stage. They get legit crazies, and they're entertaining. And that's again, I know I just said it doesn't help the voters. That probably doesn't help the voters, but it's good TV. But at least it's a better product, and I think it's more interesting to voters than what we had before, because the Utah Debate Commission, I'm just going to say it was trash, and what they did was trash. It didn't help anybody. And what we're going for with the Hinckley Institute and the Herbert Institute, I'm not holding my breath that it's going to be anything worthwhile. But yes, there should be debates for the primary. And if I'm the Democratic candidates, I debate often. Debates hurt the frontrunners. Debates can only hurt frontrunners, but they can help underdogs because it's probably their only chance to get at them. This is a funny story. When Mitt Romney was running for Senate here in Utah in 2018, I heard this story from someone who worked on that campaign, was very close to Romney World. And they said that when they got to the Republican primary, if you remember, Mike Kennedy defeated Romney at the Republican convention by 1 or 2 votes. But they both qualified for the primary, and Romney had actually gathered signatures. He was the only candidate who got signatures that year. So leading up to the primary, they had a rule. Romney's campaign basically said, Romney will never be in the same room with Mike Kennedy until the one and only televised debate. They didn't want to give Kennedy a chance to tee off on him. And I know that drove Kennedy's people insane. They said there was one event where the candidates were supposed to speak back to back. And Kennedy went first, and he was raring to go. He was ready. He was going to attack Mitt Romney. He was going to say something when Romney came in, and then it was a surrogate who came to talk. And I know that it drove people on Kennedy's campaign absolutely bananas that they couldn't get that opportunity to tee off on him. But it was a smart play by Romney because they know that there's only the downside. And then if you have a 1-hour televised debate, the opportunity to have that sort of thing happen is minimized. Trent Staggs tried it with the Republican primary debate with the debate commission. It was up at the U. He tried to bring up some stuff about John Curtis's stock trading right at the end of the broadcast. That was a planned hit. Curtis demanded some extra time, so they went over the broadcast time just by a few seconds, but those are the kind of risks that you take when you debate. Nathan Detroit says, thinking of the Veep episode with the undercard debate where the wizard robe guy just said powerful magic for every answer. Yeah, there was a guy a couple of years ago on the Idaho debate, and I think it was for governor or maybe Congress or U.S. Senate. It was he showed up, he was in biking leathers, and he was entertaining, man. He had some great answers. But when you do something like what I was advocating for, where you have journalists lobbing questions, if you get journalists who take it seriously, you're going to get stuff like, I think Kyle Clark in Colorado, and I'm sure that you've seen his clips on social media, when he was moderating a debate with Lauren Boebert last year, and she wasn't answering his questions, and he just stopped and he said, no, you're going to answer my question. This is my question. I'm answering it to you. I'm asking it to you. You have not answered it. Because that's what a good candidate will not answer the question. They'll answer the question they wish they were asked. You know who's a master of that? Spencer Cox. Spencer Cox literally filibusters himself. He does it at his televised press conference, and he'll do it at debates. You'll ask him a question, and he can talk for whatever allotted period of time he needs to take whatever that question is, whatever the issue is, off the table. So yeah, Cox, he's really good at it. He's very good at this. And it's frustrating for people who have to ask him questions. When there were governor's press conferences up at KUED, the televised ones, and there was a controversial thing that he really didn't want to talk about, he would chew up a ton of time. He would have an opening statement, and sometimes that would go 10 or 15 minutes. What does that do? It limits the amount of time that people can ask questions after that. All right, looking to see if there's any other questions. Nothing on Instagram right now, nothing on YouTube or Twitch, and on TikTok. What else did I have on my list tonight? Oh, yeah. Speaking of Spencer Cox, you think he's going to run for president? Because we're getting Spencer Cox trial balloons. We've had 2 in the last month or so. Washington Post suggested him as a possible 2028 candidate. And then Politico, same thing, said that he should run, not for his disagree better shtick, compassionate conservative stuff, but because he's a tech skeptic. There might be a lane for him there. It's a compelling argument. Jonathan Martin made that. Funny story about Jonathan Martin. When I flew down to Norman in 2023 for the Oklahoma and 2024 for the Oklahoma and Tennessee home match, and got into the Oklahoma airport, I was getting a rental car, and two people behind me in line was Jonathan Martin, who had just flown in from Utah for some reason as well. He was giving a talk in Park City and then flew into Oklahoma City and then rented a car, and I don't know where he drove to, but I thought that was interesting. You run into people in the weirdest places. But do you think that Cox is going to run for president? We're seeing these trial balloons. He does have a book deal. He's insisting he's not running for president. I've heard people say he might run for U.S. Senate in 2028 against Mike Lee, or if Mike Lee decides not to run. That would be interesting. Because he'll have to, if you run for these federal offices, your fundraising rules change. And Cox is sitting on a ton of money in his state account. He's raised a bunch of money. But he will not be able to use any of that if he runs for U.S. Senate or even runs for president. Because the rules are much different. But I don't know what he's going to do. I don't think he's done. I mean, he talks about how he wants to go back to the farm in Fairview. No, he doesn't. All right. Nathan says if Cox really opened up an anti-tech lane, Peter Thiel would shovel money at Vance and PAX to shut that down. And that's what he's run. That's the issue that hurts Cox, because there's not a single Republican voter outside of the state who has said to themselves, Spencer Cox would make a great president of the United States. People don't know who he is. He's got a little bit of notoriety after the Charlie Kirk thing and his calls attacking social media, and I think he's got a point. He's making a great point about the evils of social media and the problems that it's causing for people. And I applaud him for taking legal action against these big platforms. But yeah, Peter Thiel will just shovel a fraction of his wealth. What did Elon Musk spend on the 2024 race? $400 million, and he's worth $600 billion. That's money they won't miss. So, it's the waters will be much deeper. Plus, I don't know if Cox can take a punch. And what I mean by that is he is notoriously thin-skinned when he gets criticized. And the media here in Utah has been very, very mild on him. I cannot imagine what it would look like if he was subject to a national campaign trail. I don't think he would have fun with that at all. But it remains to be seen. Maybe he maybe I'll be wrong. You never know. Okay, I've been going at this for about 90 minutes, minus my technical problems. One question here, Rod Mosier. What has created our strong economy? Is it faltering or still strong? Is it our unhoused population growing rapidly? Our strong economy, we're not as dependent on federal dollars as other states. We're actually one of the few red states that actually is a contributor rather than one that takes in more federal tax dollars. Our strong economy, our economy is strong. A lot of it is Hill Air Force Base. That's the largest job center in the state. You have to think about it this way, though. Our economy is very strong. Everyone says we're the number one place for business, but we don't have a single Fortune 500 company in the state. And I find that interesting. The fact that everyone talks about how strong our economy is, how it's a great place to do business, but there's not one Fortune 500 company here. The last couple of years, the economy's been very strong because of all the COVID money that's been cycling through. That's mostly done now, but there was a lot of COVID money coming through. I do think that the homeless problem is something that we're going to be struggling with for years, even though we are creating that giant homeless jail outside of Salt Lake City. I'm very worried about the implementation of that. There's all sorts of ways that could go wrong. I hope that the state can find a solution. They've been doing this for years. I remember Operation Rio Grande with Greg Hughes. That was his big initiative, trying to set himself up to run for governor. That wasn't the only reason he did it, but that was a big part of it. He was very forceful on that, and then this kind of petered out. Now we have the state trying to step in. Nathan Detroit asks some inside baseball. What is Utah News Dispatch source of funding? They seem to have popped up very fast. They're part of a larger national organization called States Newsroom. I think it's called States Newsroom. It's a nonprofit. It's a larger nonprofit. They've done these outlets in the state. They do retain editorial independence, but the overall funding comes from the States Newsroom, and that is funded by I would say their owners lean more progressive. But they have outlets in a number of states. I know they have one in Wyoming. There's one in Mississippi. They have them in, I think, 30 some odd states. But that's where the funding is. And when you have money like that, you can spin those things up very fast, and there's an infrastructure that's built in. So that's where their money comes from. And they are a legitimate news outlet. They do good work. They do some good stuff, and we need more of them. The more news outlets covering things, the better. It is competition for everyone, but it's also more eyes on what your elected officials are doing. And we need that because there's a lot of stuff that's happening that's not getting reported. So the more people who are digging into it, the better. And I appreciate that. Okay, I think that's going to do it for this evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm going to go watch Pluribus because I love that show. I cannot stop thinking about that. Here's my pitch. Go to my website, utahpolitics.news. Sign up for my newsletter. It's free. If you feel like it, you can become a paid subscriber. I am not owned by a corporation. I do not have a large nonprofit organization nationwide that is funding me. I am funded by you. I am funded by viewers, readers, listeners to the podcast. People who become paid subscribers or throw some money in the tip jar. That is where my funding comes from. That's what allows me to do this. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Because I don't have to worry about pissing off powerful people. I don't have to worry about losing advertisers when I write something. So go to my website, utahpolitics.news. The newsletter's free. You'll get most of my journalism sent to right to your inbox. If you want to throw a few dollars in my way, you can get some more stuff. It's all there. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope everyone has a great holiday season. I'm probably not going to do one of these next week. It's the holidays. Nobody wants to talk about this. Unless something happens, then we'll probably do an emergency one of these. But just watch my socials, watch the website. I'll let you know if it's happening. Thank you, everybody, for watching.